What would you do if you knew you were going to live to be 110 years old? And that in 10 years, 90 will be the new 40. Well, a new book out by famed scientist and #1 New York Times bestselling author and Emeritus Chief Wellness Officer at the Cleveland Clinic, Dr. Michael Roizen, has written a new book that tells you how to live longer and better. Coming up next, Dr. Michael Roizen and his new book, The Great Age Reboot, Cracking the Longevity Code for a Younger Tomorrow.
Live from Los Angeles, this is the Special Report with Areva Martin.
Welcome, Dr. Roizen, and congratulations on your new book. I know it just came out this September, but already it's in the top 100 and climbing. So how are you feeling about this new book?
Well, I'm feeling good. I actually think this is the most important book I've written. As you know, I've had 4 #1 New York Times bestsellers. This, I think, is more important for people because it talks about what is likely to happen, how to plan for it, and how we should, as a society, use that information to decrease wealth inequality and to make things better for all of us. So I think this is really important, and so I'm happy about it, and I feel privileged to be on your show.
Well, I know, Dr. Roizen, 4 New York Times best-selling books. That is just amazing, and you've written over a dozen books. But you say this one is the most significant. That's really interesting because I would imagine this topic makes a lot of people uneasy. The thought of living to be 110, 120, even 130. Like, what's been the feedback when you tell that to people, or when they read the book? I have my copy of it. When they read that, like, what's been the overall response?
Well, I think there are 2 responses. The first is one of skepticism. Really? It's not possible. And then you tell people, think back to their parents when they were born, or their grandparents, and we had a, if you will, life expectancy in 1890 of 41. That's still grown by about 2.5 years every 10 years to be now 78. And if you will, we expect that to grow to over 110 in the next 10 years because of the exponential research into aging mechanisms. We've never considered age a disease before. The initial increase in life expectancy was due to public health and sanitation, and then childhood diseases. Now it's due to management of high blood pressure and chronic diseases like diabetes. But this is actually into the basic mechanism of aging, so that, Areva, just imagine that 50 years from now, you will be physiologically feeling the same as you are now, but in fact, being, if your calendar age, I don't know your calendar age, but say you're 85 in 50 years, you will be functioning like you're 40.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. I really want to slow you down and focus on Dr. Roizen, because when I tell people, and I've been telling everyone about your book and about the opportunity I've had to interview you on multiple occasions, when I say 110 and 120, they automatically think of someone that's going to be in a nursing home, someone that's going to be on a walker, that's going to be in a wheelchair, that's going to be cognitively, in a state of decline. But you're not talking about 110 years old and laying, almost corpse-like in a nursing home. When you talk about living to be 110 and 120, tell us what this 110 and 120-year-old person you're talking about is going to look like and what they're likely to be doing.
We aren't sure that you're going to get a skin age reversal, although that's been shown in most of the studies. What you're likely to do, though, is get the total insides revamped. Now, someday, maybe in 2050, in 20 or 30 years, it may be that you go in a car wash at one end and you end up at 90 and you end up 40 at the other end. But for now, it's organ by organ. And what that will mean is that you, if you want to, and it's a choice, if you will, to a large degree, you're going to function as if your 40s, 50s, and 60s lasted from 40 to 90. So that period from age 40 to age 60, that's going to be 40 to 90. And if you're 90, you're not going to act like the 90-year-old of today or the 100-year-old of today. You're going to be younger. So in the animal models, and there are 14 areas of research into this. So the first response is people are skeptical, how can we afford it, if you will, and I'll get to that if you want in a few minutes, because it is likely that you're going to be able to afford it well. But the second thing is people say, and how can society afford it? We'll talk about that. But they say, how can I be that young again? Right. And you say, well, guess what? In 14 different areas of research into aging mechanisms, the 2 or more animal models have been rebooted back. So it isn't slowing aging. So in 1998 on the Oprah show, when we launched RealAge, was with your producer, Candy Amelon. In fact, we said 60 was likely to be the new 40. That's come to pass. We now say with an 80% probability that 90 is the new 40, because all 14 areas are now moving into human trials. Let me give you a couple examples.
So let me stop you. So you say there are 14 areas. I know you said there are 14 areas of research that are these mechanisms that are going to lead to this rebooting of our bodies, our internal organs, as you describe them. The one I wanted to focus on, I know there are 14 of them, but the one that really caught my attention was the area of therapeutic plasma exchange, because that seems like something everybody can relate to, because plasma, is blood. So help us understand what that plasma exchange will look like and what it will do for us.
Well, that's actually one of my 2 favorite areas. So the plasma exchange, so thank you. So that started in the 1960s with the Convoy's research at the University of California in San Francisco, where they took old rats and young rats and hooked them up together, their blood systems up together. Mm-hmm. And the old rats became young. That is, when you did biopsies of their brain or biopsies of their liver or kidney or pancreas, they actually looked like young kidneys and pancreas and, if you will, livers. What that means is that their functioning was young. And so they spent 50 years, a lot of people, the convoys included, spent 50 years trying to find out if what it was in blood that did it. Then they all of a sudden, literally by a mistake of not giving anything from the old animal back to the young, from the young animal back to the old, they found out that just getting rid of the plasma was effective. This is Mr. Ratner, who's going to come in and also talk with us, hopefully, because he's an expert in population dynamics, and will talk to us a little bit later about the change in the economy. But what they did was they found out, Albert, there we go. They found out that, in fact, when you donate plasma, mm-hmm. these animals, when they got rid of their old plasma, their skin became young, their muscles became young, their brains started to function younger, and in fact, all if their kidneys, their pancreas, etc., all functioned younger. They then have done this, and that's in 2 animal species. Mm-hmm. Now they moved it to humans. And in humans with early Alzheimer's disease, they did a plasma donation. And as you say, we donate plasma all the time. They did plasma donations every week for 5 weeks and every month for the next 4 months. So 9 donations over a 5-month period. And what they found is in every domain of brain functioning, their brains got younger and they reversed Alzheimer's disease. So that was in a 280-person randomized controlled trial. And now what they've done, and that's after 15 months, they still are improving in brain functioning.
Can we use that today, Dr. Roizen? Can people who have mild to moderate Alzheimer's go to their doctors and ask for this, plasma exchange as a way to slow down Alzheimer's?
Well, let me get into that in just a second, because what they're doing now, the FDA, that was a 2B3A study. The FDA has now said, let's do a second phase 3 study, and they're doing a 3,000-person study in 100 centers. That was done in 6 centers, and I'll get you why I'm telling that in a second. So it was done 2 in Spain, 2 in Chile. In the United States, it was done at Pittsburgh in the Cleveland Clinic. At Pittsburgh, if you go to your doctor and say, I want to get this, they actually will let you get it, but you get charged for it. It's not very much because we actually pay people to donate plasma now. But the Cleveland Clinic says, no, you got to participate in the study, and 3 out of 4 will get the active treatment. The other one gets a fake of plasma donation. They get their same plasma back. But the point is that this is just one of the areas that's moving into human trials, and all of these need a little more work to make sure they work. So if I had early Alzheimer's now, would I do it? Absolutely. But if I'm just waiting for my skin aging and my cardiac aging and my other things, and I don't have dementia yet, I'd wait for the results of the study to make sure this is the area. Because there are 14 areas, and we don't know which one will be the best. Or if any of them will actually show that you get 90 to 40. But this is one of those.
So of these 14 areas, it's not like everyone's going to need to do every 14 of these medical procedures, right?
My guess is one or 2 will break through, and most of us will do that 1 or 2. So, and another one is actually, my other favorite is one that is expensive. That's very cheap. I have 2 more favorites, one of which is very inexpensive, and I'll tell you about that in a second. The other favorite is gene editing. So in beta thalassemia and in sickle cell disease, in beta thalassemia, these 15 to 20-year-olds need a transfusion once a week or so, and they have a life expectancy of maybe 25 or 30. But when they get this therapy, they knock out the gene that causes the beta thalassemia hemoglobin. All of a sudden, they have a life expectancy of 65 or more, and they don't require transfusions, and they're not sick because they have what we call fetal hemoglobin that delivers oxygen pretty darn well. Not as well as adult hemoglobin, but much better than the thalassemia hemoglobin, so much better that they don't need transfusions and they aren't sick.
So gene editing, why is that so expensive?
Well, it's so expensive right now. The actual product isn't expensive, but they have to tailor it to each person. And the trials, if you will, the research trials are expensive as drug trials, if you will. So it's still fairly expensive. In fact, at the Cleveland Clinic, we have what we call top 10 innovations of the year. In 2014, we named CRISPR-Cas9 one of the top 10 innovations. And they're supposed to change clinical care in the next year. But this was so exciting. A human being to get the CRISPR-Cas9 total body and knock out a gene costs $5. That's what the product costs. But to identify the gene, to make sure it's safe, to do all the other things around it, and to do the clinical trials has been expensive. This will get much cheaper over time, our bet is. Okay. And let me tell you about...
So what's your third favorite, kind of...
Third of the 14 that are most favorite is using artificial intelligence to uncover the 4th degree structure of proteins. So the 4th degree structure of proteins, if you will, This is the Gladstone at the University of California in San Francisco and the Cleveland Clinic have used different computer models to look at the fourth degree structure. That is, we know simple structure is black and white, if you will. When you've got depth, that's third. The fourth is how the folds of the protein and the drugs are. They've used the fourth degree structure of proteins and of every drug already approved by the FDA that's generic. There are over 1,550 of them. I think there are 1,563 now that are approved. So the Gladstone looked at them and found a simple water pill, butamidine, Bumex, $4 a month now for treatment as a water pill, but it blocked the attachment of tau and amyloid to brain cells and glial cells, the cells in your brain that are thought to be the problem with dementia. And it blocks the attachment of those things that cause dementia to the brain cells. They then looked at a 12 million patient.
Go ahead. No, I was going to say, so these are 14 medical breakthroughs that you are expecting to happen over the next decade. But clearly you wrote this book today rather than waiting 10 years from now. It's because there are some things that we can start doing today to get our body rebooted. Tell us, one or two things that we can do. I know there's an app that's associated with the book that monitors everything from our sleep patterns to our diet to our physical activity. Super excited about the app because that lets us have like our own little checks and balance with us all the time. But tell us something we can do right now for us to be that, that 90 that's going to be behaving like the 40-year-old.
Mr. Ratner wants to take a whack at it. He said, let me tell you one of the things I'm doing. So go ahead.
Well, welcome, Albert Ratner. You are co-author of this book, so welcome.
So Michael talks about 14 things, and we keep thinking of things doing one thing. So we think, well, if we do cells, we're going to do it for this. But when we do the cells, we can do it for 10 things. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean you have to do everything to pick up all 10 things it does. It means you could do it individually. Mm-hmm. So what happens to me, I'm 94 years old. I'm going to be 95 in 3 months.
Wow, congratulations.
I have 18 stents. So as we were going through this, I decided I would try to do bariatric, whatever you call it, oxygen exchange. I can't even say what it is. So I go down to Orlando, Florida, to go through this process in which you go through atmospheres, and I go through...
You go 2 atmospheres down to 1, 2 to 1, 2 to 1, because it reverses, in fact, both brain aging, but actually it reversed skin aging, it reversed heart function aging, etc. So go ahead.
So I go down, I do 3 of them. They find out that I had heart failure before I went. I get rushed back to the Cleveland Clinic, and I get my 3rd pacemaker defibrillator. At the age of 94, it runs out when I'm 102. So as I'm doing that, I have this horrible wound. Okay. And in the studies that we did, one of the great things is red light therapy, where you can take red light or laser light. It goes through your body 8 inches, and I put it on my wound, and it gets fixed like that.
Okay.
That's something that's been used for 2,000 years, but they recently found out that with this red light therapy, it's good for skin, it's good for wounds, and it's good for, what's the 3rd thing it's good for? A hair. Those 3 things. Now, when I was down on the therapy for oxygen, it's already proven to be fantastic for people who have had strokes as long ago as 2 years.
Well, let me ask you this, Albert. You went to this center in Florida. You went through this oxygen chamber. Are you feeling any different now as a man?
I'm just sorry that my heart pump doesn't allow me to go back.
Oh,
But the point I'm making is we're looking at 90 to 30 instead of saying, if you look at that about whatever you call it, that for strokes, it's fantastic.
okay. But Dr. Roizen, you said it's also for skin, right?
Right. It also, this is very interesting because they used it to look. This is going from 2 atmospheres of hyperbaric oxygen down to 1, 2 to 1, 2 to 1, 3 times in a 90-minute period. Your body senses it as going from 1 atmosphere to 0.4. So your body regenerates stem cells, which are the repair cells of your body. So it repairs. So they were looking at it for strokes. In doing it in it's not just hyperbaric where you go to 2 atmospheres, you go to 1.4 atmospheres. It's not a home chamber. It is actually doing this in a regular fashion to get that what we call hormetic response of going from 2 to 1, 2 to 1, 2 to 1, which is the equivalent of going from 1 to 0.4, 1 to 0.4, 1 to 0.4.
You know, that's a little technical for us, but I'm just trying to understand: is that being in this chamber? Does that
what it is it regenerates stem cells which repair every organ. So they repaired the brain. That out of the 89 people that were doing it, they asked, how many of you can we biopsy the skin of? And only 13 men volunteered for this. None of the women volunteered to have 12 biopsies of their skin. But in the men, it made the elastin and collagen 13 years younger in the 1 year. So it regenerated that. It regenerated in people with liver injury. It regenerated that. So we don't know whether that's one of the 14 areas. And Albert is now did the other, if you will, another one, which is using red light at specific wavelengths, which turns on your mitochondria. Meaning normally what your mitochondria are, they're your energy factories. They take fat and sugar and make it ATP, which gives us our cells our energy. Well, the red light therapy has been shown to bypass the early steps of that energy factory process and just give you more energy without needing fat or sugar.
I want to show you these pictures. I want my producer to put up these pictures. I was in St. Louis recently. Got to see my 90-year-old aunt, and the first picture is Zernona Clayton. Okay, let's start with Zernona. So Zernona is in the white. She's a civil rights icon. She's 92. I'm going to see if Rashad can crop that picture and get a little closer, but let's show the other picture. It's my aunt, Alberta. She's actually 90. So these are 2 African-American women in their 90s. So, you know, they already look phenomenal. They're already, Zernona is jumping around on a stage. You know, she's traveling. She's taking care of her 96-year-old husband. Are women in their 90s, like these 2 women, how are they going to benefit from this reboot? Because they're already in their 90s, like Albert.
They've got to, like Albert, live for these processes to get approved or jump ahead and say, I'm going to try this, even though it's not, if you will, known for that. So, the point is, you make it 10 years, you are 80% likely that one of these breaks through because we have 14 shots on.
So anyone living today, if they live 10 more years, so if Aunt Alberta goes from 90 to 100, and by then you think these 14...
And she's going to reboot back to 40. You're going to have...
Oh, wonderful.
He's not an expert on being 95, all right?
All right, Albert, you're right. You're an expert on that.
So here's what's happened. My basic problem is that I have a very bad heart problem. And I don't need 14 things to happen to fix me. What I need to happen is a stem cell to grow to strengthen my heart pump. That's going to happen. It doesn't mean Mike's looking at this and saying, well, you have to do all of this. No, that's not the way it works. If you have a stroke, when I was down in Orlando, I saw people that had strokes and were finishing up this process and were much better. So he's talking about the ideal situation from a research standpoint. The hell with him. I don't want to talk to him. I just want to go to Japan and let them give me the stem cells to take care of my heart.
So what Albert is talking about is stem cells. If you're doing it one at a time, you take a bone marrow biopsy, it takes 4 months to grow 20 to 30 million stem cells, which is what it needs. You put it with the growth factors and you inject it in the heart. Very expensive. But in Japan, actually it was an American scientist, Dr. Mike West, who found out how to make stem cells without immunogenicity. So instead of having to do it your own, they can take anyone's stem cells, get rid of their immunogenicity, grow up 40 billion or trillion of them, and give them to 50 people rather than one at a time. So they in Japan have found a way of doing this inexpensively. It's using American technology, actually. And they're in a trial now of 20 people with much worse hearts than Albert to try and see if that works.
Okay, I want to go back, Dr. Roizen. I got to get my aunt, and I hope Miss Clayton, to that next 10 years. So what are the things, that's Miss Clayton again, 92, that's my aunt, she's 90. These women already look phenomenal. There's no reason they can't live another 10 years to benefit from some of these medical advances.
And it probably will happen before the 10 years.
So what now, what should they do, and what should all of us who want to be alive for that next 10 years so we can take advantage, what should we be doing?
So there are 180 things, plus about 50 supplements we've been sent information of which about 16 actually are a benefit. So I'm going to show you one of these. Wait, no. So I'm going to show you one of these, if you will. One of these is this simple thing, creatine. It's a muscle builder for people 15 to 30. Football players use it in the NFL. So it builds muscle. But guess what? It was tried in 80-year-olds who they didn't want to have frailty. And just taking this in coffee or tea not only improved their muscle strength so they didn't get frailty, but they were looking at side effects in the brain, and they said, guess what? It improves brain functioning too in the randomized controlled trials. So there are now over 180 things you can do. But the most important one is to relieve stress. My guess is that the most important thing to relieve stress is have friends and call friends. So you're calling your aunt and her calling you routinely means a great deal to her and to you in relieving stress. So does having a purpose in life. So your purpose is to get all of us to be healthier and to enjoy life more. That's a great purpose. But we'll find out what her purpose is and help her do that too. So there are a whole bunch of simple things.
Okay, so that's a really stress-free.
I tell Albert to walk 10,000 steps a day. He hates walking. So instead of that, he plays ping pong, or he plays with his grandkids on the floor, and you get step equivalents for that 10,000, 100 step equivalents a minute for both of those. And he gets his 10,000 doing things he enjoys doing.
So I know, let me ask you, Dr. Roizen, people that walk, 3 miles a day, that's not quite 10,000 steps. You probably got to do close to 5 miles to get to 10,000. Is that correct?
That's correct. But again, as Albert says, you get step equivalents.
Okay.
So even gardening, cooking, taking out the garbage, vacuuming, everything you do gives you step equivalents. We've got them in the app and in the book.
The name of the game is what you're saying, Dr. Roizen, is you got to keep your body moving, right? You got to be moving.
That's one of the most important things. And we used to think it was just because it improved your heart and blood vessels to get more blood to the brain, important. But it actually turns on a gene. You get to control your genes. So instead of having 300,000 genes when the Human Genome Project started, they expected to find 300,000 genes, but they only found 22,500. What's the rest of the DNA in your nucleus? They initially called it junk DNA. But after 8 years, they found out it was actually switches that control your genes. All genes are as protein factories, and whether they're on or not are under your control to a large degree.
And you're saying we move, we turn on those genes that were previously thought to be junk genes?
Well, the junk is the switches. So we change the switches to on from off And that switch, one of the switches when you stress a muscle, turns on a gene that makes a small protein. You don't have to know the name, but it's called Roizen. Roizen goes to the brain and increases your memory center in the brain. It's the only organ that really matters because it keeps you functioning and it keeps your memory intact. So, in fact, one of the most important things you can do is improve your memory center, and physical activity turns on the gene that does that. How do we know that, actually? Because both Harvard and the University of California tried to patent Roizen the same day. Hopefully someday we'll be able to take it as a pill, but for now you got to move to get it.
Yeah, I know a lot of folks like to say sitting is the new smoking, and that sitting around and being inactive is just as harmful to people as smoking. Let's talk about eating for a minute. I know that in the book and in the app, you talk a lot about nutrition. You were quoted as saying food is a relationship that we have, and we should only eat food that we love and that loves us back. So what are those foods that are likely to love us back?
Well, food is the relationship. You wouldn't marry someone who is trying to kill you every day. You shouldn't eat food that's trying to kill you every day. So you may love French fries, but it's trying to kill you. Bad relationship. On the other hand, avocado, salmon, if you will, greens are all things that are trying to make you live longer and younger. So those are good foods. Only 5 foods age you. Simple sugars, added syrups, and simple carbohydrates. White bread, one of the worst things. Those 3 foods increase your blood sugar, which cause inflammation, which increase your risk of heart disease, stroke, memory loss, impotence, wrinkles, and cancer.
Okay.
And the other two foods are red meat and processed red meat and egg yolks. Those actually change the bacteria's DNA. They change the switches in the bacteria inside you to produce an inflammatory protein that you absorb. So
all
the
those
reason
people that like omelets, let me stop you. All those people that like omelets should start eating egg white omelets.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
So that's a perfect food, egg white omelets, because you get plenty of vegetables and you get egg whites, which are healthy. So that's a great choice.
So you want to avoid egg yolks and red meat and processed red meats. And then you said simple syrups and sugar products, right? And white bread. It's so funny. I was just home again in St. Louis, and I was telling a friend that I grew up in St. Louis, everything was white bread. Everybody. And I don't know what they do. They go into poor communities around the country and they push Wonder Bread. They push this white bread. So kids in poor neighborhoods grow up kind of addicted to white bread, and it's horrible for you. So
that's right. And you know, one of the interesting things, so I called Smucker's one day and I said, can you make kids' meals with whole grain bread? And they replied to me, we would do that if any school asked for it. But no school asked for whole grain bread. They're asking for white bread. So you've got a lot of power, Areva. So please ask for some schools to ask for the whole grain bread so that when they make school lunches, which they do a lot of at Smucker's, if some of schools ask for whole grain bread with peanut butter, they have real great peanut butter at Smucker's. You know,
yeah, and I have friends that own a lot of McDonald's. I'm going to ask them, can you guys start using whole grain buns on those, Happy Meals and sandwiches that you sell to kids? I want to get Albert back in. Albert, you're a specialist in population economics, or they call you an expert in population economics. How does that relate to living longer and the great age reboot?
Well, let's just before we go to let me make one point. The 3 of us are 3 different ages. And we're just different generations, basically. The fear I have with what we're doing is everybody's going to worry about how they're going to live to 125, instead of understanding that if they started today to do the simplest things in the world. So if you're my age, what does this mean to me? I'm not going to live long enough, but what can I do? So what are the simple things that I've done? I only eat during the daylight. I feel better because I did the light. So the whole idea is to look at what you like and do better. You open up the refrigerator, you take everything out that doesn't like you. So the idea isn't to wait for the 10 years. You want to feel better tomorrow. The truth of the matter, I feel much better today than I did 3 years ago, and I've done 4 or 5 things. So the key to this isn't to get to the goal, you have to start.
Tell me the 3 things you've done, Albert, that makes you feel better.
So the 3 things: I only eat when it's light. The second thing is I'm a basketball nut. I stay up all night watching sports games. They convince me that what you have to do is you have to get enough sleep, 6.5 hours to 8, no less and no more than that, and you'll feel much better. And the third thing,
so we stop watching the Lakers at night.
Don't watch the Lakers.
Getting your sleep at night, okay?
Right. The third thing is that I don't think I have stress at all. But what I find out is when I go to sleep and I can't sleep and I start doing deep breathing, then I fall asleep much easier. When I do the red light therapy, I go to sleep much faster. I eat less food than I ate before. I eat different food. I did 5 or 6 things, and honestly, I feel much better. So we want people to start. Now, what's the result if you do this? If you're 25 years or younger, you can live to 125. And you can decide the things you want to do to get there. You can decide if you want to walk, if you want to run, if you want to jump, if you want to play hopscotch, if you want to play with your kids. If you're 75 and older, you can live for another 25 years. And if you're 75 years and older, what I would say to you is the biggest thing in your life is relationships.
Before you get to that, Albert, what about those of us that are between 25 and 75? What should we be looking for?
What is what?
So between 75, you're going to live someplace in that range of 100 to 125. And the younger you are, the more chance you have of living longer to 125. What that means from a population economic standpoint is that you got a plan, you're going to get 2 or 3 jobs, and the great news is your 40s to 60s will be extended to 40 to 90. So that
what about Dr. Roizen and all those people who grew up in an era where you retired at 55, 60, 65? So people who are thinking of retiring at 60 and 65 need to rethink that, right?
Absolutely. Because you're going to get, if you're going to live to 115, you're not going to want to retire at 65 and do nothing for 50 years.
Right.
So the great news is you're going to have the energy to do more, and that compounding is really beneficial. So our third author, Peter Linneman, would say what Australia, Singapore, and Denmark have done, which is in addition to Social Security and Medicare, they force everyone, even at a $15 per hour income, to put away 3%, and they guarantee 4% on it. If you do that and live to 65, starting at 22, you end up with $250,000. But if you don't touch it till 95, it's $1.4 million.
So, Dr. Roizen, let me ask you this. Are you getting this information to companies? Because I'm thinking, as I'm a lawyer, I'm a civil rights lawyer, as you know. So I'm thinking of companies that have mandatory retirement policies. I'm thinking of companies that even if it's not mandatory, there's this push, to cause people to leave the workforce, starting at like it's 55 to 65. And they're pushing these people out of companies. And these people, as you said, may live another 50 years. So they can work well into their 70s and even 80s.
So you could do this when women were having 5 kids. They're now having less than 2. There's a terrible shortage of workers. The truth of the matter is we have no choice. The budget office Congressional Budget Office says in the next 3 decades, this and the next 2, we're going to have 34 million people more in total. That is not enough people to support this economy. What we say is you're going to have 117.5 million people. And if those people will be working longer, because we don't have enough people in the workforce. And the only way we can grow is by taking those people now living. We believe 70% of the people living today will be living in 3 decades from now. And we're going to be forced to do it because you see the worker shortage now. We've gone in 3 decades from having an increase over decade of working population from 13% to 7%. And in the last decade, we only had a 4% increase in new workers. It's why McDonald's can't get employees. It's why schools in the next 20 years aren't going to have students, because we don't have these births. So what happens is longevity is an answer also to income inequality. Mm-hmm. In the lowest quintile of incomes, 20%, the lowest 20% of incomes, only 37% of those people work.
We need more workers. So Reva, to answer your question about the companies forcing people out, I can tell you, at least at the Cleveland Clinic, we're trying to retain everyone because we're short of nurses, we're short of service representatives, we're short of LVNs, we're short of physicians, we're short of everything. So we're trying to retain as many people as long as possible. I think we actually, so the point is that we're going to need more workers, and those experienced workers, those nurses who are 55 and 65, we need them badly because their experience is so valuable, both in training younger nurses and in caring for people. And there are plenty of different jobs that don't require as much physical activity, but they're going to get benefit from that physical activity. And so, in fact, if you look at it, we're doing all we can to help people stay younger, to get benefits from these new therapies when they come available, and to keep working because we need workers in America to grow the economy.
Okay, so we've got to have
we need older people and their wisdom. And that's absolutely. Very, very important.
Very important. So, and we've got to change our mindset, Dr. Roizen and Albert, because people, again, have been conditioned in this country that they retire in their 50s and 60s because they were expecting those to be their golden years. Maybe they only had 10 years left and they wanted to enjoy that time with their grandkids or travel or pursue their hobbies. Now that they're going to have 50 years left, they've got to kind of rethink when they leave the workplace. I do want to get back, though, Dr. Roizen, I just want to give people some very practical tips on what they're going to learn when they pick up a copy of your book, The Great Age Reboot. And as Albert said, we don't have to wait for those 14 medical breakthroughs to happen. They're things we should be doing now. You already told us the 5 foods that we should stay away from. You've told us that we should all be doing 10,000 steps a day or something equivalent. If we're not actually walking, we should be doing some equivalent of that. Is there any weight that, we have these weight charts that when we all go to our doctors say if you're 5'8", you should weigh this, or if you're 5'6", you should weigh that. Is there any ideal weight that we should have as we think about living longer?
Aging doesn't occur until you get above a body mass index of about 30. So there's very little aging between normal weight and in the normal weight and overweight, there's very little aging. It's only when you get obese that the body mass index starts to age you. So worry about that less. That's actually, and one of the great things that Albert said, I only eat during the day, and he's lost 18 pounds on this. That is, a calorie is a calorie in the test tube, but in your body, a calorie in the morning is less than a calorie in the evening. So if you're going to eat food, eat the same number of calories, eat them more in the morning and more at lunchtime than in the evening, and stop eating 3 hours before bedtime. You do that for 4 days and you'll have more energy. You won't be as hungry at night, and you'll sleep better. So that's one of.
Wait, so we should worry not about an actual number, worry about getting over 30% of our body mass, right? 30. Is that what you're saying?
Stay below a body mass index of 30. Right.
Okay, a body mass index of 30, because that extra weight is hard on our hearts. It's hard on our.
It causes inflammation. So the leading cause of actually arthritis is obesity. One of the leading causes of, if you will, we call fatty liver disease, type 2 diabetes, and your risk for heart disease, stroke, even erectile dysfunction and dementia is overweight.
What about intermittent fasting? Is that something you're recommending? I know you're saying try to eat all of your calories, or the majority of them, during the daytime. Stop eating 3 hours before bed. Is that like intermittent fasting, or we don't have to think about it so
if you only eat in an 8-hour period, that's a form of intermittent fasting. And what that does, even better than that, is 5 days every month. So put 5 days on the calendar in a row. You go to 750 calories a day. And then the rest of the month you can eat normally. But those 5 days reset the aging clock. And you want to avoid protein and avoid simple carbs during those 5 days. The easiest way, you do a soup. If you will, the head of the gerontology group, Walter Longo at USC, is the one who came up with this. You eat 36 ounces of diced tomatoes, 36 ounces of water, equal water and diced tomatoes. 12 ounces of corn niblets, 12 ounces of water, equal water and corn niblets, and then onions and spices to taste. You can have 17 10-ounce portions of that and stay under 750 calories a day. By the 5th day, you get a little tired of the tomato soup, but you've done it. What it does is it resets all your genes.
And you need to do this consecutive days, right? You can't do Monday and then Friday and then.
No, it's got to be consecutive days, because you need to reset the genes to function as if they're much younger. And somehow that does it. So in food, other than that, the rest of the week, the rest of the month, you eat whatever you want, excluding those 5 things, anything you love.
Let me ask you about this olive oil. I read somewhere that you says it's a good idea to take a tablespoon of olive oil.
I've got it right here. So this is actually olive oil from California. It's one of the good olive oils. So Chile, California, Turkey, Spain are the olive oils, the extra virgin olive oils that are made well. And what those do, and you want it in a brown bottle or a tin, what those do is actually improve brain functioning and improve cardiac functioning and decrease cancer rates. We don't know what it is in the olive oil that does that, but of the cooking oils, and the, if you will, eating oils, the best one we know of is extra virgin olive oil.
Is it okay if you're putting that olive oil on a salad or on vegetables? Is that the same as,
it's great, and it's exactly the same.
Okay, so get it on your salad, get it on your vegetables. It's going to have the same impact. Last question I want to ask you is about this brain function, because I know you are a big advocate of doing those activities that keep the brain active. Tell us 1 or 2 things we can do to keep our brains sharp.
So on our app, the Reboot Your Age app, we have integrated a speed of processing app. So you can get it directly from Brain HQ, or you can get it through our app. But speed of processing games in randomized controlled trials decrease your risk of brain dysfunction as you get older by over 40%. Just 18 hours of practice over 10 years. 2 hours a year over a 10-year period starting at age 73, and the first of the randomized controlled trials starting at age 75, and the other 2. So there have been 3 randomized controlled trials. So memory games help a little bit. Crossword puzzles help a little bit. Bridge that is not timed helps a little bit, that type of thing. But the only one that really did it in a big way with what we call speed of processing games. It's like playing Fortnite with your grandkids, if you will. It's whatever forces you to do things quickly, apparently turns on, just like walking quickly, it turns on the gene that makes your hippocampus bigger, which again is the memory center of the brain.
All right. Lots of information to take in around our nutrition and obviously sleep and brain functioning, exercise. Again, it's Dr. Roizen, and joining him is Albert Ratner, a co-author of this new book, The Great Age Reboot, and the app. Where can people get the app, Dr. Roizen?
At greatagereboot.com.
And is the app free? Is the app free to anyone that goes?
There's a free trial on it, but then there's a subscription price after, I think it's after 10 days.
Okay, so you can start off free, try it out. Then there's a subscription price. Obviously, pick up this book by New York Times bestselling author Dr. Roizen. He's joined by Peter Lyman and Albert Ratner, and this book is everywhere. Barnes & Noble, Amazon, every bookstore where you can find books.
Local bookstores too, right.
Bookstores too. Boy, live to be 110, 120, and look out, 90 is the new 40. I love it. Thank you so much, Dr. Roizen. Thank you, Albert.
I look forward to being on the show with you in 50 years, Areva.
And I'm going to take a screenshot of this photo because we're going to show the 50-year Dr. Roizen and the today Dr. Roizen, and I'm looking forward to you looking exactly the same.
And I'll be there to bless both of you.
All right, Albert's going to be right there with us 50 years from now. What a great treat. I can't wait. Thank you guys so much for joining me.
Thank you.
I want to thank Dr. Roizen and Albert Ratner for joining me this morning. I am super excited about this concept of living to be 120, 125. I have so much more I want to do with my life. I have some friends who are thinking they want to retire. They're thinking about like giving up their jobs, their careers. Not me. I got a lot of living I want to do, and I'm so glad I had an opportunity to meet Dr. Roizen and get acquainted with him. And now I have my own copy of The Great Reboot, The Great Age Reboot. I recommend that everyone get a copy of this book. Keep it by your nightstand. Keep it, in your briefcase. Carry it with you. Follow what Dr. Roizen and his colleagues have, advised us to do to live well today. We don't have to wait, as the experts have told us. We don't have to wait for 10 years for these medical breakthroughs. We can start today living better, feeling better by how we have our relationships with food, what we do around exercise, what we do around finding our purpose and keeping our minds sharp. My words to live by today: your health is your wealth. So go out there and get real wealthy by getting healthy. Be safe out there. Remember, we're all in this together.